Hello and welcome to a very special interview we have here today to mark the Holocaust Memorial Day. I'm here interviewing Jack Kagan, who is a Holocaust survivor and also part of the Bielski Jewish partisan groups that resisted the Nazis and rescued over 1,200 Jews. And this is an incredible story made famous by the film Defiance that starred Daniel Craig, that recorded the history of this remarkable and amazing Jewish partisan group. As you might hear, there's a lot of noise around us right now. That's because they're about to open at the Imperial War Museum, and it's thanks to the Imperial War Museum that we're able to conduct this very important and historical interview about the Holocaust. Jack, it's an absolute honour and a real privilege to have the opportunity to interview you today.
Thank you.
Understand what you went through in your story, remembering that the Holocaust was 70 years ago and represented probably the darkest period of European history, and is certainly very horrific for the Jewish people that killed over 6 million Jewish people, died and perished at the hands of the Nazis. Can you tell us your story? You're from a town in Belarus?
I'm a town called Novogrudek.
Novogrudek.
Novogrudek is a new town, but in fact the town was formed about 1,000 years ago. It is not very far from Minsk and from Vilnius, the capital of Vilna. The population was mostly Belarusian people. We lived in harmony for many, many years with them. We had, of course, anti-Semitism in the later years under Poland, but it was livable till about 1935-36, when Pilsudski died and anti-Semitism has raised much more than 1938. There was a boycott for Jewish goods. 1939, the war broke out and the Russian army came in. We were extremely pleased. We ran, the whole Jewish population, in fact, ran to meet the Russian army with flowers. And the Poles never forgave us for that. But what was our alternative? Knowing that half of Poland was cut off by the Nazis, which the Jews will suffer, at least we will live a normal life under the Soviets. We had lots of institutions in Novogrudek, Jewish orphanage, old age home and all that. All this has been closed. The synagogues had to be closed. Rich people were sent to Siberia. You couldn't go to the synagogue because the Russian state was against religion. And so it went on till the 22nd of June 1941, when the war broke out between Germany and the Soviet Union.
Going back a little bit before then, can you tell us about the Jewish nature of the town Novogrudek?
They were a very... So first of all, they represented 50% of the town. 6,000 Jews and 6,000 non-Jews mixed between Poles, Belarusian and Tatars. Tatars lived in our town. The Jews, they were very rich in our environment, very rich, not money-wise, but in traditions. We were not Chassidim, which very religious, very normal people, which you will see it on the DVD which I've left you. There it will explain what the town looked like. It was mainly, if you are young, you had to go to a Hebrew school called Tarbut, and the slogan was, Ata Ivri daber Ivrit, you are a Jew, speak Hebrew. Everything was revolved around the synagogues. Every trade had its own synagogue. My father went to the small business synagogue, which was in the synagogue square. We lived a rich life, rich in education, and rich in the general atmosphere. And all this, of course, was destroyed, first of all, by the Soviets, which they closed all these institutions. And then, of course, after the 22nd of June, the trouble started with the Germans. The town was bombed immediately afterwards. The whole center of the town was burned down. The Germans came in on the 4th of July, and practically within 10 days atrocity started. The first atrocity was they caught 52 Jews in the middle of the square, put them out in the square, assembled a German military band, played Strauss music, while the 52 people have been killed. I was not very far from there, and I could hear the music. And later, when I was liberated and came to England, I thought I imagined it. I imagined that it couldn't be, they couldn't kill and play Strauss music. So I got in touch with the Vatican, because later sisters from the Netherlands were killed in our town, and they would have some sort of a record. And yes, they sent me a booklet confirming that Strauss music was played while the killing took place.
Was there real fear before? Because you talked earlier about what it was like to be under Soviet occupation, and then clearly the Russians withdrew as the Nazis approached. Was there great fear in the Jewish community then about the Nazi coming invasion of Belarus?
They had fear. They heard from refugees who escaped from Poland. There were two factors. One, that first of all, nobody ever believed that they will take innocent people and kill. After all, when it was a discussion between my father and my uncle on the day when the war broke out, whether we should escape deep into Russia, the answer was, what are we going to run? They won't kill us. We are used to work. We will work in a camp or wherever it is. The second thing is that a lot of people have escaped and managed to get through. But the invasion was so fast, so quick, that the roads were blocked. There was an old border between Russia and Poland, and there was KGB or NKVD at that time, not allowing people to cross the border, fearing for spies, because there was a lot of, the Germans dropped a lot of dissidents which would cross the border and create havoc with the Russian soldiers. So we remained knowing that we will be in trouble, but not to such an extent.
So what happened when the Nazis occupied Belarus and your city of Novodudek? What laws did they put in place, and what restrictions did they place on the Jewish community?
Immediately, there was strange enough, the laws came out from Riga. Hose was his name. And the first law was the Jews should wear stars front and back. A Jew mustn't walk on the pavement. A Jew mustn't walk in a park, to sit in a park. No trade to be mixed with non-Jews. There were no buses in our place, but a Jew mustn't get on a bus. A Jew must not leave the town unless he got permission. But the worst law of all, the worst law, was that you lost the right. You had no right. That means that if anybody wants to beat you up, if anybody wants to come into your home and take away from you, rob you, you cannot go to the police to complain, because you had no right. And that was the worst law of all.
Yeah. So how did your father and your mother react when all this was going on?
Well, our home was burnt on the Saturday of the 27th of June. We had to move in with probably 8 families together. In our family, my father married my father. 2 brothers married 2 sisters, so we were very, very close together. We moved into the home, and my father started working with my uncle in a saddle workshop, which I joined them afterwards. They used to get food because they used to get working still for the farmers, and the farmers used to provide food. But on a daily basis, things have changed continuously till it came to the 5th of December, where it was orders the Jews mustn't go out in the street for the following day.
Is this 1941?
1941
Yeah.
still. And the following day we had to go to the courthouse, which was outside the town. We stood there all day long in the bitter cold, because Nowogródek is one of the coldest places in Poland. It was called the Polish Siberia. And that day was very, very cold. That was Friday. That was Saturday. They stayed there all day long till evening. They opened the doors and 6,000 Jews went into this big building and the small buildings. Sunday was relatively quiet. Monday morning, first thing in the morning, assessment arrived with lorries and so on, and he started making a selection. The selection was 2 questions were asked. What is your profession and how many children? My uncle went first. He was only 2 years older than my father. Saddle maker, 2 children to the left. My father followed, saddle maker, 2 children to the right. Means my uncle to the death, he had to walk down the stairs from the 2nd floor, which we have resided during that night. There were lorries. They were immediately beaten up. 50 people to a lorry, pushed on a lorry. The lorry was taking them to a village called Skridleva, which was outside the town. There they had to lay the 50 people with their face down in the snow. You couldn't move. The next station was they had to give up all the valuable which they had on them. The 3rd station was to undress, and the 4th to run to a double pit, which was 2 pits at either side with a walkway in the center. They had to run to the center walkway and being shot. And during that day, 5,100 out of the 6,000 plus Jews were killed. So it means 85% of the Jewish population were killed on the 7th of December 41. And strange enough, that was a day of America declaring war on Japan, declaring war on America.
During that time, was there any way you could get any information about what was going on? Or was all communication cut? You didn't know what was happening when the
They
Nazis
knew
came?
only from the small neighboring towns, and there was very peaceful, quiet. We didn't know about the killing. We heard about Horodish, a place where killing took place, but nobody believed it. Why should they kill a whole population? And from outside world, we heard only about the German success in Russia, that they are nearly near Moscow, and that they used to see old papers on the floor, German papers, which my father and uncle, of course, could read German and understand. So our situation was, in that time, extremely bad. The Germans were winning the war, and we are trapped. After this killing, we thought maybe we'll survive. 1,300 survived. So it was just over 6,500 Jews, and 5,100 were killed. And were taken to a ghetto. The ghetto was 28 houses, very small houses, for 1,300 people. You can understand what a tight situation we've been in. And we lived there. We worked in the courthouse, because there they've made workshops. And I worked in the barracks, which the Russians haven't finished completely. So the Germans have taken to put on double glazing and various other places during the winter time, and during the summertime, the springtime, I worked on straightening out the earth. And there was, of course, atrocities taking place continuously. Life was getting much harder, 250 grams of bread and soup a day. And then, of course, in May, they started sending in people from the various villages, from Korelichi, small towns, Korelichi, Lubch, Shelib, all round. Another 5,000 people in a place where it wasn't enough for 1,300. And we knew any day it will be atrocities, a killing will take place, because it was humanly impossible to live in such a condition. And at that time, in June 42, I went to work as normal. And suddenly, I used to go to the German barracks and pick up end of cigarettes, pieces of bread which they used to throw out, whether for the Jews to pick up or for the birds, we'll never know. And I used to pick it up. And that I went one day, and suddenly out of the corner, a German soldier came out, rouse you there, and started hitting me with the back of his rifle till I came to the center of the barracks. And there was already quite a lot of people standing there. They are going to shoot 50 people. They've assembled 50 people, and they are going to be shot. And just I was the youngest, the smallest, and opposite me there was a well. And at the well they put up a machine gun, and I couldn't look straight to the machine gun. So I turned around. So suddenly I had a whip on the face with a pair of white gloves that I should look at the machine gun. And we stood there, I don't know how long. At the beginning my knees were weak. And then you get used to it. And suddenly Reuter arrived. Reuter was in charge of Jewish affairs, and he asked us to go back to work. And we knew something bad will take place, because we realized what they were going to punish us is because two workers, farmers, who worked in the barracks, they lived not very far from the barracks. They came into the farmer. There was a German police waiting for them. The farmer told that two Jews will be coming. They hit them over the head. They took the rifles and ran away. So that was a punishment, would be to kill 50 people. But they didn't punish us purely because not to create panic in the ghetto. And so from that day, I decided I will work with my father in saddle making. The foreman has agreed to let me do it. And I worked there till the 7th of August 42, when the Germans have surrounded the courthouse, the ghetto, and the barracks. They took everybody out from the ghetto, took them across the road, just literally across the road, which is called Litovka, and killed them. And they killed during this time over 5,000 people. The people in the barracks, they let them stay, and the people in the courthouse where I was, they were left alone. The workers from the barracks were brought back to the ghetto. The ghetto was halved because it's too much for 250 people, 500 people which remained. And for us, Reuter arrived and said, from now on, you are going to be in an Arbeitslager, you are going to live here and work here. And there was quite a lot of people from Jatlowo, a neighboring town. They knew already about the partisans, and during the night before the Germans have managed to make the fence of double sets of wire and a wooden fence around us, they've managed to escape.
Yeah.
But by that time, they knew that partisans do exist, Jewish partisans, and there is somewhere to run to.
Yeah, that must have given you such great hope and inspiration to know that there were Jewish fighters out there that were resisting the Nazis and also rescuing Jewish people there. How did you all feel when the Nazis massacred over 5,500 Jews? Was there a sense of feeling that this is desperate now, that they're going to eliminate the
How can
Jewish
one
people?
feel it? Every time when the first massacre took place, we thought, well, maybe we'll remain alive. When the second massacre took place and they divided craftsmen, we thought again, maybe the craftsmen which remains, the 500, after all, they need us. They were making uniforms for the German army. It's winter, it was in Russia, which you can imagine, it's minus 30, minus 40 degrees. My mother was making fur gloves for the German officers. The shoemakers were making special boots for German officers. Why should they kill us? It's going to be another winter, it will be approaching. They can't let their soldiers freeze to death. But it wasn't so. The killing of the Jews was much more important to them than saving their own officers. Because when we moved into the camp, and we heard about partisans, of course, people started to escape. The biggest thing which could happen, that there is two righteous Gentiles, which I know of two, but apparently there were more, which came forward that if you do escape, you can come to my place and I will make you contact with the partisans.
Amazing.
That was an unbelievable thing, because that was a religious a Catholic farmer. He saw the massacre of the 7th of August, and immediately after this massacre, he made contact with the people in the ghetto, and he said, if you do escape, you can come to me. I won't let you in at home.
Amazing.
And I'm going to make contact with the partisans.
And he knew that he was risking his life by doing this.
Yes, and he did risk his life, because later they put a fire to his house, they pushed him and his wife, they burned them alive. As the children, they sent to Rosen, concentration camp.
And you escaped, didn't you, first of all, because a gate of the camp was open.
That was... Everybody started thinking how to escape.
Yeah.
But it was at the very, very beginning, it was very simple to escape. But you didn't know where to escape to. You had to have an address where to go to. Because the forest is so big around the area, you'll get lost in the forest. The farmers will give you out for a kilo of sugar, which the Germans were given. Some farmers gave out juice just for 1 kilo of sugar. So escaping was very risky and so on, till you knew where to escape to. And then, of course, people we were extremely lucky. We didn't have any water in our camp. So 4 parties a day used to go out to fetch water. And 10 people. We used to bribe the guard, 11 people used to go out. But most important, people used to come in from the partisans to come into the camp.
Interesting.
And when they came into the camp to take out their brother or mother or whatever it is, they used to know the news of what was happening in the partisans. And my cousin escaped first. He escaped in beginning of November sometimes, and I prepared my escape. I looked at my shoes. It's winter already. -20, -30, I can't survive with these shoes. The sole was falling off. So I went to the warehouse and I asked the warehouse man, he should, if I can steal a pair of boots from the Germans, to steal something from the workshop means hanging. But nevertheless, he had a son my age, which he lost, and he decided he will risk it. He gave me one felt boot. Felt boots is made out of felt, that's why it's called felt boots. They are warm inside, something like an oven, but they absorb water. But because the frost is off for 3-4 months, that I didn't worry what will happen in the spring. During the winter, at least I will feel warm, and maybe I will find a pair of shoes later in the stage. And I took the second boot, and I was watching for partisans to come in. And one morning, Rufke Oppenheim, a friend of mine, came in to take out his mother and sister. And from then, I decided to watch him like a hawk to see when he's going to escape, and I will escape with him. I mentioned it to my parents, they gave me their blessing. And on the 23rd of December, 1942, I saw first of all Rufke Oppenheim that he's ready to escape because he was wearing a heavy coat. And I saw a very big lorry coming into the camp to take back the ready goods which we have produced. The German army driver must have felt so cold that he has driven in the lorry, rushed out to warm himself out in the guard room. When I saw it, I prepared already the yellow stars to take off, and I had a number at the back. Everybody had a number. Mine was 334. I took off the number, I took off the stars. I went out from the gate, I crossed the road into the small forest, and there were already people who were escaped before me, ready for Rufke to come and to lead us. Rufke came, we were 14 people, and we started go to the rendezvous which he made with the partisans. We started walking a shorter way. Dogs were barking, and when dogs are barking, you can't go near it because farmers will come out and so on. So we made a very big detour. It was snowing like mad the days and nights before. The snow was soft, and the walking was very, very difficult. We walked to a place called Britchinka, where people used to always fetch water, very clean water. The water runs very, very fast. We did not realize that ice doesn't form on a very fast running water. It was covered with snow. And the first people crossed over. By the time it came to me, I was one of the last ones, the ice gave way and I fell in the water. Of course, the water was very cold. The felt boots absorbed all the water. When I came out from this little river, I knew that I'm in trouble. The snow was sticking to me, I was elevated, and I left the people to go on their own because I knew there's a farmer, he was a dog catcher, I knew where he lives, and I've managed, I walked up a hill from there, and there I came to the dog catcher's house. His name was Bobrovsky. The woman, his wife, came over to me. She gave me a very big plate of hot soup. I sat down by a tree. I had the hot soup, but they said they can't let me in the house. They are too afraid. We were after 12 o'clock. The rendezvous with the partisans was for 12 o'clock. Therefore, we are late. We will have to go to the little forest, all 14 of us, to wait there for 3 nights. And the partisans will come in 3 nights' time. That was the arrangement, and they will pick us up. I was starting dreaming straight away, and I knew that I will not survive the 3 nights. I made a quick decision. I'll go back to the camp. I started walking. It was very difficult. First of all, because it was so much snow which stuck to my boots. I rolled down the hill which I walked up to the main road, and there, to my luck, like an angel was sent, a farmer which was wrapped up, because it was so cold, on a sledge, going to town. I managed somehow to crawl on the sledge. He took me past the Ghetto, which was still in the Pereshika, on the right-hand side. I saw the guards marching forwards and backwards. He took me to the center of the town. He turned left to Minsk Street, and just near the camp, I fell off from the sledge, and I've hidden myself. How long I waited there, I don't know. But the people came, the first party to fetch water, the first 10 people. One of them noticed me. He took me in the center, and I managed to get him back into the camp.
Amazing.
My father hasn't gone out to work yet. He tried to take off the boots, not possible. With a file he had to work and a knife. He cut the boots to pieces. My toes were completely black. After a few days' time, we didn't have a doctor, we didn't have any medicine, we didn't have an iodine, dispirin or anything, whatever there is. A dentist came in after a few days. My toes were completely black, and he said they got to be cut off. Now, first of all, to be in a camp and not to be able to work and to lay, that's a death sentence which I signed. A few days later, the dentist came in with 4 people. They held me down. I couldn't shout, put in a rag in my mouth, and they cut off my toes. The flesh wasn't so painful because it was frozen, but maybe he cut it too soon. The bones were terrible, terrible. With the dentist clippers, he clipped it off. and they put me on top of the bunk, of the third bunk, because the people had to work, I can't disturb them. And that was on the 24th of December. Now I lay there. On the 4th of February 1943, we had a radio, which was smuggled in a long time before. On the 4th of February, we had tremendous news in the mornings that the Germans are lowering their flags because the Battle of Stalingrad against the Eighth Army. So we were extremely happy that what happened. But by evening, we were extremely sad because the Germans have liquidated the ghetto. The 500 people on the 4th of February were all killed. So it means the only people from the 10,000 people from the Novogrudek surrounding, there's only 500 people now left.
And sadly, your mother and your sister were killed, weren't they?
They were still in the camp.
Yeah.
My sister, my father, my mother, my uncle, of course, was killed in 41, and we lived in the camp life. Food was cut down, and so we stayed there. About March, the German Reuter came again. He said that our output is very good, and he would like to, he recommended, and it was accepted, that 250 better workers will get additional food. And my father was on this read through the list who will be there. Every 10 days they can go to a different place, to the workshops, and they will be getting the extra food. A loaf of bread for 10 days, plus a little bit of margarine and so on. And that happened every 10 days, and I was laying on top of the bunk. Spring arrived, it was very warm, and on the 7th of May, I was laying on top, watching down through the window, and out of the 250 people marched off to get the extra food, and out of nowhere, police came from all sides, surrounded the 250 people, started hitting them, and my mother came still to the window and said it's nothing, but I know what's going on, and I cleared everything where the pillars of the people which we slept there. I lay down, I put my fingers in my ears not to hear the shouting of the people. I lay there for quite a while. My fear was not death. My fear was if they will find me and I can't walk, they will beat me to death. And I lay there for quite a long time. I heard the machine gun fire. And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the people who remained alive were let in to the barracks, including my father. A plan was immediately made that the following night they are going all not to go back to the living quarters, but to stay in the workshops. We had some hand grenades which was bought by various policemen, cut-off rifles which was bought again from policemen, that they were throwing the hand grenades and escape. If only one will manage to survive, it's better, because these people, they worked for the German army where they needed most, and yet they killed. So they knew that they are not going to survive. But I can't walk, I can't run. So everybody went there. My father and myself remained behind. If we will hear the first shooting, we will hang ourselves. My father prepared 2 nooses. But every morning they came back, the people, with an excuse. It was not too dark, it was not too light, and they didn't escape. But a new plan was taking place to dig a tunnel. Because the Germans are not afraid to come into our camp, because our camp was so dirty, bugs were in the millions on the walls, which they were my biggest enemy, one of my biggest enemy. Going in the bandages and not allowing my toes to heal. You can imagine that from August And now it was August 42 to May, which was the killing.
Yeah,
I've never changed any clothes. Slept in the clothes sometimes and lived there. Didn't have enough water to wash the body, except during the winter, which we used to melt the snow.
Oh.
But they gave us only drinking water and water to wash the hand and face. So we're really in dirty. Everything which was manufactured in the camp had to go through a delousing place, steaming place, so it should be clean for the Germans. The Belarusian guards were not allowed to come in our living quarters. So we knew that we got a certain safety built-in. And we started going 2 meters below the ground and started digging. After a short while, we find it will be impossible because no light is burning. We have to we didn't have electricity in our living quarters. But there was a very good electrician, and he managed to find a cable which was laid in 1921 when the building was built, and he managed to get electricity in the camp.
That's amazing.
Not only that, he made a switchboard that he could cut off the electricity from the searchlight which was going continuously round. And the digging continued. And we dug, the plan was to dig 100 meters outside the barbed wire and the fence. There is wheat growing. And they dug till in August. In August, a tractor arrived and cut off the wheat. That means we are in trouble. But that saved our lives. Would we have escaped as planned in August, none of us would remain alive.
Wow. Because
the Germans have brought in 57,000 soldiers in Overgrudek in the area to combat the partisans. That was an order from Hitler himself.
Yes.
And this was Operation Hermann. And SS officers from various parts of the front lines, they brought soldiers to combat it. Would we have escaped? We would have been right in the center of these soldiers. But we decided to dig another 250 meters where the sledge goes down.
Yes.
The work was very, very hard. We finished digging on the 26th of September, 1943. Each one received a number where he's going to stand. A list was made of how many people there are, which part of the list you will see here in the museum. And I was one of the last ones because the tunnels was only 70 centimeters by 70 centimeters.
Yes.
If I won't be able to do it, if I will collapse, that means nobody will be able to walk over me. Yes. So I was one of the last ones. When I came out, it was already machine gun fire and so on. The night was made to order. It was just made to order. The searchlight was cut off and it was raining. It was black. You hold out your hand, you couldn't see your own hand. Some people, after coming out, they lost the direction. Instead of running towards the forest, they ran back towards the camp. And when the guard saw a movement, they started opening fire, not knowing where to shoot. The mistake was that we had electricity in the tunnel and darkness outside. So when the people came out from the light into the darkness, they got completely confused.
So how, I mean, this is an incredible story you're telling here, that you're part of Jewish groups. You broke out of the
whole
ghetto.
camp.
The whole camp broke out the ghetto. How did you feel? Were you afraid of going outside of the camp?
We were not afraid. We were afraid only, the only thing was to be afraid if you are being caught alive. That's the only thing. 10 people, however, 2 elderly decided, with families, they decided they can't escape. So they have made in the loft hiding places, not knowing. 5 people on one side, 5 people on the other side. They waited till everybody escaped and the Germans moved out the machinery and they walked out of the camp, I think 10 days afterwards. And they saw the whole movement when the Germans arrived in the morning and they didn't find anybody in the camp. Now, out of the 250 people, 170 survived.
Amazing.
Most of them went to the Bielski group,
Yes.
which we knew approximately where he was operating. Myself and a friend of mine, who again had missing toe on one foot, they managed to cross the road again, to go into this little forest, and we went back not knowing that Dokec's house, Bobrovsky's house, is already burned down. We came there, we saw the house burned down, and we went into just a place where we were able to hide. My feet, the wounds opened up completely because through the torn shoes I could see blood on the outside. In the morning we saw shepherds walking about a little bit lower. They laid through the night there. They laid through the night. In the morning we saw the shepherds. The following evening I went to the nearest farmer to ask for food. When I escaped, I went into the workshops and I stole a cover from a gun and I carried it outside, but I didn't need it. I knocked on the door, the farmer came out. They asked him for food. He gave us a loaf of bread, a small loaf. We broke it in half, one half from me, half from my friend.
Wonderful.
He gave us milk and he told us, "Are you aware that the camp has escaped, the Jews have escaped?" We didn't answer him, and the Germans are chasing after that. Because we went 180 degrees around the town, we couldn't see anybody, we couldn't hear anybody, we didn't know anything. And so we walked for about 4 nights. On the early morning, we saw a horse and cart, and from far away, when it was nearing to us, we heard Yiddish being spoken. We came down and we recognized the people from Novogrudek. And they took us to the Bielski camp.
Wow. And the Bielski camp was run by the Bielski brothers, particularly the leader, Tuvia Bielski, who was made famous by the recent Hollywood film Defiance that starred Daniel Craig. What was it like to escape from the ghetto, escape from the hands of the Nazis, and there before you see a Jewish partisan group, you see these magnificent men of bravery and courage with guns and machine guns and horses.
I can never describe it now. It's a humanly impossible way to describe, because there were 2 camps at that time. We were, strange enough, we were very not far from a German garrison, which was guarding the bridge over the river Nieman, which I couldn't understand. How can partisans be so near to Hutashklanna, where the Germans are guarding the bridge? It was a group of people. There must have been about 360, 380 in this particular camp, all with rifles, machine guns, and so on. That was a fighting group. All tall, twice as tall on horses, sitting on horses, coming from a mission or going to a mission. And I stayed with my cousin. It was just before we escaped, 26th of September, so it was just after the Jewish New Year.
Wonderful.
And that was Yom Kippur, in fact.
Yes.
They were preparing to go to a mission to ambush a German which lorries will pass by. As it happens, the information was not correct, and they came back with nothing. But after a few days, an order came out from the Russian general that they must all non-combatants plus 180 fighters must go to Naliboki Forest. Naliboki Forest was about, I don't know how many kilometers it was away, but it's a forest which is 40 miles by 40 miles. That was in August 42. The Germans raided the forest and they didn't benefit anything. It was such a place.
Can I ask you, what was it like to meet Tuvia Bielski, the leader of the Jewish partisan group? What kind of man was he?
I just saw him. I couldn't meet him. I couldn't be introduced to him. but he was tall, a giant of a man, with very strong vision, very strong character. But he had good helpers behind him. When I will tell you, that was a split of the Bielski from the non-combatants, that we went to Naliboki forest.
Yeah.
Tuvia Bielski was a leader of it. Zush was staying with the combatants, and he wasn't anymore a commander. There was a Russian commander given to a Russian commander. He was a reconnaissance.
Okay.
Then Asoel was taken away completely to a Russian group, and Tuvia brought him back. And they marched towards Naliboki forest. You had to have tremendous reconnaissance people to know where you are going. You had to cross main roads. Don't forget, nearly 1,000 people. It's not one person which can hide himself. 1,000 people to cross highways with a German motorcyclist coming from time to time.
Wow.
So it was a dangerous area. Anyway, we managed to get there, and you can hide yourself if the war can go on for 100 years in a Naliboki forest, but you need food. You're away from every place. When the Germans have raided in this Hermann operation, they burned 110 villages around it. So there were no villages around it. They destroyed the town completely. Naliboki was completely destroyed. And there, he had enough vision, Tuvia, that when he moved out after 1942, this German raid, he left a group of people. When the villages were burned, he took these 40 people to dig potatoes.
Yeah.
And they made 200 tons potatoes were reserved made for the winter. So we had a reserve of food already there. When they arrived there, it was starting to build a village.
Yeah.
A village, 50 people to a hut. So it was very cleverly built. We had a very good engineer. And workshops were made because there were so many skilled people that you had to make tailoring workshop, not only for our group, but to serve the partisan, shoe repairing. If the Russian partisans got a cow, you can't eat a cow.
Yeah.
So they used to bring it to us. They had a workshop for making sausages. Nice. So they gave them so many kilo sausages for a cow. Nice. The cow was slaughtered, a tannery was made from the skin, used to make leather. From the leather, boots, and so on.
Can you tell me what contribution did the Jewish partisans make for the war effort in resisting the Nazis and also rescuing so many Jewish people from the
a tremendous contribution in two ways. Number one, it was a Russian organized communist partisan group. So you had to do function of going on raids onto Germans as they've instructed you.
Yeah.
At the same time, the non-combatants, as I mentioned, got these tremendous workshops which helped the non-Jewish partisans with shoes and dressing and cots and so on. And at the same time, we had a hospital. Russian wounded soldiers used to come into our hospital. Doctors, which we had too many, used to give them out to various Russian groups. And so they managed they stayed there till the big offensive started in 1944, and exactly to 3 years to the date. 4th of July, the Germans occupied Novogrudek. 4th of July, 44, we were liberated and came back to Novogrudek.
Amazing, but I mean, this is probably one of the most incredible stories.
Yes, but there were many Jewish groups which we don't hear about. There was a group from Minsk called Zorin, very, very capable Russian officer, communist, And he had a group of 700 people which were not far from us, fighting groups. There were small groups. There were groups of people who joined Russian partisans. I got a list of 7,000 Jewish partisans which were in the area, and I published it. We stood shoulder to shoulder, which you can see it in the book, named of every Jewish partisan, where he served, what year he started serving, and so on. All these documents are available in the Russian archives.
Amazing. And how did you, after the war, how did you end up coming to England?
I nearly finished off going on the Exodus.
Wow.
But before the Exodus, I was in displaced person camps in Germany.
Yeah.
And they didn't take me on the ship which I supposed to have gone because of my toes. They said that I won't be able to climb over the Alps. That the group supposed to climb over the Alps to confuse the British agents. So I had a cousin here in England, and I managed to get permission, and I came to England on 23rd of June 47, after being 18 months in a displaced person camp.
That's amazing. I have to tell you now, I mean, we're living here, 21st century, and sadly anti-Semitism is still on the rise across Europe. How vital do you believe it is for you to tell your story and for people to understand the horrors that took place under the Nazi occupation of Europe, to remember those precious 6 million Jewish lives that perished at the hands of the Nazis?
It's important for me to tell the story for a number of reasons. That they've been there and I've managed to survive, and that was a true form of it. That's what it was. I'm a witness to everything. And when the film, Ray Meir made a film, I don't know if you've seen it, it's Extreme Survival. And before he made it, when I told him the story, he went to, or somebody went to Minsk from this group, from the BBC, to verify that my story is correct. And before I managed to change the monuments from Russian monuments to Jewish monuments in my town, because it was written down as a monument, Russian citizens were killed. And I changed it to Jewish and what date and so on. The mayor of the town couldn't believe the story. And had to give an advert in the Novogrodek newspaper, and people came back that the story is correct.
Amazing, amazing.
And that's very important.
And now you're doing media interviews, you're speaking in schools.
I speak in schools. People should know it must never happen again, which when the war was finished, I thought it can't happen again, but yet it's happening in places. And we must see that it doesn't happen.
Definitely, definitely. Is there one lesson that we can learn from this? Is there one lesson from history that we can actually learn from the Holocaust?
There's a number of lessons that what people, we could never imagine that people will take ordinary people, not enemies, people which you don't know, to take out and just to kill outside for no reason at all, just because we were Jews. And the same thing is happening to learn a lesson, not to follow examples, not to follow people which are trying to agitate us.
Yes. And I want to thank all of you for watching this very special program to remember what happened during the Holocaust and what happened during World War II. And we're so thankful for brave men like Jack Kagan to tell his story of what he went through. And it's important that we remember and we learn the lessons of what happened over 70 years ago, that today we stand united with the Jewish people against the rise of anti-Semitism across the continent of Europe once again.